Picture this: labs at midnight, ventilators racing against a pandemic clock, and tears in client meetings. Lexi Reid's life was shattering under STEM's invisible weight. But what if one doodle could rebuild it all? Your reset starts here. Let's get started.
So I went the academic route. I did the bachelor's, the master's, the PhD, the postdoc. Yeah, so it's a bit of a winding path. And I used to be an artist at the time too. So I used to create and paint and collage. And I found I couldn't even face my studio. What had been an enjoyable creative outlet suddenly became too much.
How dare you just sit like right next, his name was Chris, sit right next to Chris, like that's not your position. Women self-select themselves out of it, and we do that with jobs.
This is From Wounds to Wisdom with Barbie Moreno. Real talk, deep healing, and stories that turn pain into power. Let's dive in. Welcome, Lexi. I know that you are a creative wellness coach, so we're super excited to have you on here and talk about that.
I'm very happy to be on the podcast. So thank me, Barbie.
I know that you have somewhat a similar history to mine as far as working in a male-dominated industry, having burnout. You had kids that were during the pandemic. So I'd love to hear your story and how you got to what you're doing now for your creativity and how you're helping people.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a winding path, as I'm sure a lot of women have been on. So I went the academic route. I did the bachelor's, the master's, the PhD, the postdoc. Realized I didn't want to be the one doing the hands-on, what we call the wet lab research. So I basically looked for other opportunities, and I ended up working for a not-for-profit for a few years, who did a lot of partnerships between um, science and technology grad students and industry. And that led me to working with the federal government. And so I did grant reviews and a lot of business development. And again, out and about with meeting people in science. And again, that was definitely working with, I'd say, predominantly a lot of men, because I was working with people who were used to working with industry. And unfortunately, a lot of women were very hesitant and put themselves forward to partners. So a lot of the grants that I was reviewing were definitely very on the male side, I will say. And a lot of the workshops I did, I noticed, again, because I was working with a lot of science and engineering, typically the women that did come to the presentations often wouldn't ask questions during the presentation, but they would come up to me afterwards and ask their questions because they were nervous about showing up in front of their colleagues with the perception of not knowing the answers.
Right.
So it's interesting. I've sort of seen this come up and again and again. And then I eventually left the government and worked for corporate industry, a privately owned company that designed and developed medical devices. And again, we had an interesting split of where the women were found within the company. Again, the women were typically in the finance side, the quality side, not so much in the engineering side. And also we had a number of project managers, and there was a bit of a revolving door at times with the women expressing burnout, high pressures, being to the point of tears in front of clients because the demands were unrealistic. And I found, during, as I think we talked about during the pandemic, my company had landed quite a large project to work on emergency ventilators. And you can imagine the pressure our company was under to develop those. And so we were working 24/7, and I was on the quality and regulatory side. And it was our job to get this, from start to finish design approved and, in the hands of the Canadian public as soon as possible. So it was a lot of pressure, and we were expected to be on call 24/7, answering emails, working on designs on the fly. And I also had my kids at home during the time, and son in early high school, struggling with math and calculus, and nobody was teaching very well online because they were just learning it. My daughter was in middle school. She had just started middle school, had just left elementary, so that was all new for her. And just, there's a lot of stuff to juggle at home versus work. And I just felt like I was burned out on all ends. And I used to be an artist at the time too. So I used to create and paint and collage. And I found I couldn't even like face my studio. What had been an enjoyable creative outlet suddenly became too much.
Mm.
And it's interesting. I started looking into art therapy because I thought, look, I've got all this creativity. How can I use it in a different way? And I started getting into doing small, simple creative exercises where, they'd only take 5 minutes, right? And it wasn't about producing something to sell. It wasn't about producing a finished good. And that took the pressure off. I could just get back to creating and getting into flow. And that really helped relax me. And eventually I realized I really enjoyed doing that. And I was telling some of the women I worked with and some ex-colleagues, and that started leading me down to the path of what I call creative wellness. So using creativity to improve your well-being. And it really resonated with a lot of the women I spoke to. And so I started developing a coaching program, and that's what I'm now pursuing full time, is working with these women. I basically target women in STEM who are facing burnout. So science, technology, engineering, and math. And yeah, that's kind of where I am today right now.
So a couple things. As I hear your story again, even though I was in finance, not the industries that you target, but also my audience is generally women too, because I feel like we take on so much more. I wanted to get your take and your from your experiences and your perception on what we see, like how women are at work versus a male, like why we take on things so different, how we take on things so different. What's the difference that you see between the two genders and how they work?
Yeah, definitely what I've seen play out is, again, in these, let's say a meeting, you've got 10 people in the room, you're pitching to the client. The louder voices are going to talk over the quieter voices. And typically that seems to be men at the table. It's also interesting seeing the dynamic. The men all seem to rush for the table, whereas the women hesitated in the corners of the room.
Yep.
In fact, I remember saying to one of my female colleagues, I'm like, bring your chair up to the table so you can, so the client can see you. And she was like, oh, I didn't want to get in the way. And I was like, they want to hear from you. So you should literally be at the table.
I
So
remember.
it just little things like that. So yeah, the quiet voices, not wanting to interfere, not wanting to be seen to be a burden. Some of the project managers I talked to who were on the younger side felt it was a bit ageist. They were being spoken down to because they were perceived to be younger and female. And even though they had the best solution, until the older male program manager put forward the exact same statement, it
Mhm.
wasn't taken seriously.
Right.
So I heard a lot of frustration that there was a bit of an authority bias. There was definitely a male bias. Yeah, a lot of fighting to be heard in the room and literally to be in the room. So I've seen that play out. Definitely in the consulting industry. I did say it play out a bit again in the federal government with the grants. Again, the women felt that they couldn't apply for the big grants because again they felt they didn't have the experience to be in
Yep.
the running, and so they'd self-select out, which was really unfortunate. So I've seen it play out in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Again, just that not having confidence in themselves that they were worth speaking up for unless somebody else said it for them, which I thought was, terrible.
And if you're like, from my experience, so we would have in the private bank, we would have weekly meetings. And I remember when I first began working in this industry, I was the only female. And so again, I would stand in the back of the room and see, is there a chair left for me? Like I would never just go and sit down, right? And then as I developed more and more confidence in my position, I remember somebody told me, go sit down. Like you don't need to wait, like just go find a seat. And then I eventually ended up like always putting myself in a position where I was sitting by like the leader of the group. And I felt the men around me get resistant to that, and almost like they thought like, how dare you just sit like right next, his name was Chris, sit right next to Chris, like that's not your position, you know what I mean? And they felt like they were completely open to being able to sit next to him, but if I did, it was like I was stepping into a space that I shouldn't be stepping into. And I also have learned along the way that, like you said, women self-select themselves out of it, and we do that with jobs. I would imagine, like you said, we do that with grants. We do that in life. Like we say, oh, we don't qualify 100%. So we're not going to submit ourselves because we don't feel like we hit all of the boxes. Whereas men will hit like 50%, 65%, and then they'll just go for it. They have that confidence of just like, oh, well, I'm going to go for it. Right. And I always wonder, I mean, I kind of know from my experiences that I've seen, but what others think of why we do that as women.
Again, why do we self-select ourselves out? There was, and I'm sure you're aware of the study, but they looked at salaries for positions at universities, and they found a number of positions where they're deemed equivalent experience. They both had lectures and students, but women were paid 80 cents on the dollar.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that that was the one good thing I'd say about the federal government is they were very transparent about their pay bands.
Mhm.
And if you applied to a certain role, you knew what you were being paid. Whereas again, in industry and academia, it didn't have that same forced transparency. And that's where these discrepancies come from. And as to why we allow that to happen, that is a very good question. Because, and again, I think it is a cultural belief.
Mhm.
I would say it's definitely, I've seen it play out within academia for sure. It's one of those things where it's a bit of an old boys club, and they will promote. They'll give the speaking opportunities to some of the male grad students over the female grad students, or worse, I've certainly seen this happen with postdocs. It happened for me. I thought I had lined up a postdoc with a company. It was an industrial postdoc. And then they basically said, "Oh, but you're probably going to go on leave. You're child rearing age, bearing age." And I was like, "I don't think you're allowed to say that." One thing. And
Mhm.
two, they rescinded the offer. I was like, "Are you kidding?" Like, it wasn't until we got to the face-to-face interview and they actually saw my age, and I was female, and it was just, I couldn't believe, I felt like I'd stepped back to the 1950s.
Yeah. And that's common. That's very, very common. In fact, it's crazy that they actually say it and they will say it. And there are so many women who miss opportunities simply because we're the ones who physically hold the baby, right? Like in our body. Like we can help that. Like if we didn't do that, there wouldn't be a population. Like I don't know what they want us to do about it. But somehow it makes us less than because we're going to take time off to give birth to a child. Like we won't be able to complete the job. Whereas I know men who go on vacations for long periods of time and nobody says anything to them. We're actually giving birth to people in the world, and yet we're discriminated against, and supposedly they're not supposed to, but they do.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely they do, having lived that experience. And I've certainly shared that story with, other women, and they said, "Oh yeah, we've had that happen to us." Or parental leave is another fun one. Like women are allowed to take the time off, but they don't because they feel it's going to be held against them. And
And it is.
often it is. Again, I know some of female colleagues who are applying for grants, and they have those gaps
Yeah.
in their history. And when they say, "Well, where's this gap? You didn't publish anything in this year here." And it's like, "Well, I was home raising a child."
Yeah.
Yeah.
As if that's
And
like so much less than, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Not that I published 3 papers the year after that because I worked 3 times as hard to catch up, but it's the gap is what's held against them.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of my stories that I share when I speak and stuff is the fact that I had postpartum depression. It was discovered about 4 weeks after I had my son. I was only intending to take 6 weeks off of work because even though I'm allowed 16 in California, I knew if I took that much time off of work, it would not go well with my company. So I called my manager. I said, I have my doctor said I need to take more time off. He said, no problem. The next day, my office was given to a male. And when I called and asked about it, he said, well, he doesn't need to take time off to have babies. All completely legal. in the state of California. They can take away your office. They just simply can't give your job away, right? In my office, that sounds silly to people, but that was my pride and joy because I had earned my way to the top, and that top was the office spaces and where you were located, right? So we all kind of share that kind of burden. I know that you have done something amazing because you were talking about the fact you didn't have the ability to be creative when you were burnt out. And you have discovered ways to help us, specifically women, come back to that place of creativity that is so natural to us. Can you talk to us about that?
Oh, definitely. And I'm working with a fantastic group of women right now, and we're doing a group program. And it's amazing because again, they all said, "Oh, I thought I was too tired to take this program. I've got it. I just didn't want one more thing to do."
Mhm.
And now that they've been in it, I think we're on week 5 now or 12, and they just said, "This is the one thing I make time for because I know it's going to recharge me. I know it's going to energize me." One, it's the sense of just doing the creative exercise, and for a lot of them, it's just getting it out of their head and putting it on paper, and that makes it easier to deal with. And I've had another client say, after she put something on paper, it's called a battery exercise, and you show where you have various batteries, one for work and one for family, one for personal time. And you basically draw the levels of how much energy is left or not left. And, she actually discussed this with her family, and she said, "Look, my personal time is so low. I need help getting some personal time back. But she felt she couldn't give herself permission to take that time because she didn't want to say no. And I feel like that's another conversation that we we don't allow ourselves to say no.
Right.
We're always on, we're always giving. And so the fact that these super stressed out, burned out women took, time each week to do these creative exercises and then take time to discuss. And it's the discussion where they get to share their stories, share the thoughts, share their feelings. I've had a few clients say, "I can't believe I had all these feelings I was repressing," until suddenly one of the exercises is called the bridge. And you basically draw all the things you're dealing with on one side and all the things you want to move towards on the other. And then you draw the bridge. And the idea is that you get to put yourself, where are you on that bridge? And I had one client say, "I haven't even stepped 5 feet near the bridge."
I'm not even on the bridge.
I'm
I'm
not
just
even on the bridge.
looking at it from a mile away.
Yeah, exactly. And I had another client who realized, you can draw obstacles under the bridge. And she like, "I've just drawn, these giant waves. I don't even swim. And I don't know, so it was, but she drew something intuitively she knew she was dealing with. But it wasn't until we sat there and talked about it where she's like, she had very much an aha moment. I watched her face and she's like, "I didn't even know I was putting obstacles in my way that I couldn't deal with until I saw it on paper." And a lot of them, it's like, I couldn't believe it until I saw it on paper.
Right.
And we're not talking fine art. I say very clearly during the exercises, use stick people, use your kids, school supplies like Crayola markers, crayons, like just, and, some of my clients are like, just the act of getting to pick colors is fun. Like, it's just, the actual act of doing the activity is relaxing. The stress comes out, the relief comes on. And then the other thing is then they have like an what I call an artifact of the experience. It's like a snapshot of how they were feeling. So they can look back at it and go, "Oh, that's how I was feeling last week. No wonder I was so stressed." Right.
Right.
So there's, I'm learning there are so many benefits. I hope they'd get the benefits, but when they're actually telling me all these very different experiences, and I have women in all ages of experience, from very early in their science career all the way to fifth and sixth careers and thinking of retirement. And yet they all get something out of doing these exercises and sharing their stories.
So can any woman work with you, or do they need to be in the STEM world?
The only reason that I said STEM specifically is because it was my background, and I was certainly seeing very much that male dominated additional pressures, that invisible labor of fighting twice as hard to be in the room to do the same role,
Yeah.
basically. But yeah, no, like certainly some of the women in my group are, I'd say on the side of STEM.
Yeah.
It's, they're facing very much the same problems. It's just that was my background. And so I reached out to my network, and that's where it started.
Is it in person?
Right now, I'm doing everything over Zoom. And, I'm trying to also build up a YouTube channel so people could sort of self coach themselves, do some exercises as well. But, I live on a island in Canada, so I'm now beginning to work with people across North America. I would love to work with people in, across different time zones.
Yeah.
I think, the more the merrier at this point.
And what does a program look like? Like, is there a commitment of a certain amount of weeks, months? Like, what does your program look like?
This program, it's called the Creative Reset Program. It is a 12-week program. As I mentioned, we're just doing week 5 right now. So I'm trying to run basically quarterly cohorts.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking of because I'm seeing such success with some of these women, these aha moments. I am thinking of doing some one-on-one consulting as well, like coaching. And so that's something that I'm going to start bringing into my portfolio as well. But the reason I started with the group first is because at the time when I started this coaching, I was working full time and I didn't have the bandwidth to take one on one
Right.
clients. But I realized this is something that I'm passionate about, and I decided that this is something worth focusing on. So,
Yeah. I think
um,
that it would be beneficial across for male and female, but primarily female, all age groups, because I see even my 17-year-old, her boyfriend comes over and she feels the need to like literally pamper him. And I'm just like, I mean, I feel like it's in our nature. I feel like I tried to teach her to be like an independent woman and like not bow down to like every man's whim. But every time he comes over, she's like taking the entire kitchen to like create him a meal. And I'm like,
wow.
yeah. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like this kid can make his own food, but it's like this. I feel like it's a need to prove her worthiness, even though I don't feel like that's how I raised her, but I kind of think it's somewhat societal. And also, like, I experienced my own things in my past. But that being said, I wandered off. I think that your program would do well for others. I know you can only do like so much yourself, but it's such a beautiful idea that I hope that its concept is taken and expanded.
And definitely, there is also on my website, there is a free challenge. It's like a 5-day challenge, and you get basically an email each day with a creative activity. And that's a great introduction into basically a taste of what the coaching feels like.
Love it.
So that's freely available for anyone to try. And I also have a weekly newsletter called The Creative Shift, where I give out weekly prompts about mindfulness, art therapy inspired exercises, and just general wellness tips as well. Like, I live in a beautiful area surrounded by forest and oceans, and certainly I'm one that tries to be outdoor for my personal well-being as well. So just thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love that. So where do people find you?
Easiest place is definitely my website, and it's Mind Art Wellness.
Mhm.
And the newsletter's there, the free challenges there. You can read about the group program there. I also have book reviews that I've written on terrific books that I've read. I'm starting to put podcasts that I've been on so people can listen to my story and get a sense of kind of what I do. So
Right.
there's a lot of resources that people can, choose and choose their own adventure, I guess.
Love that. We'll have that information in the description. So we talked about, kind of the wounds of being a woman and especially a male-dominated industry. But in general, from your experiences and what you've learned, what is some wisdom you can pass on? Just maybe one tool.
Just small steps lead to big changes. Every time you give yourself permission to say no, or even just take a pause before saying yes, it's your
Mhm.
choice whether you want to do the activity or not, whether you have capacity. And just, I think we don't give ourselves enough time to pause. We just often just say yes because it's the least path of resistance. It's not going to ruffle feathers. So I think just taking those small steps definitely can lead to big changes.
Yeah, knowing that you're worthy of creating that space and time for yourself.
Definitely.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. Appreciate having you on.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And yes, I hope people come find me.
Yeah, I think that you have a lot to offer for sure. I just feel like as our conversation, like, unwinded, that your gift to the world is so needed.
Definitely the women I'm working with, they seem a whole lot happier, I will say that.
Yeah.
So and if I can help make that small contribution, then I feel like I'm definitely on the right path as well.
Yeah. And I bet that feels good.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll have
It
all,
is my pleasure to do this. I like seeing more creativity brought back into the world for sure.
we definitely need it, especially with so many people on social media and stuff like that, and just kind of numbing their brain.
Yes, the buffering,
Yeah.
whether it's overeating, over drinking, over scrolling. The best thing about creativity is it is pretty much you could pick up a pencil and a piece of paper and even just like doodling,
Yep.
for a few minutes, that will give you an act of kindness and calm that you can't find anywhere else other than just inside yourself.
Yeah. It's funny. My mind always goes to being a mom, and I'm like, yes, my children need to doodle more too.
Well, that's it. And you could do it together, right? Like I remember when my kids were young, I would like get out all the art supplies. We'd sit at the table and even just that act of creating together builds a connection.
Yeah.
So
Oh, perfect. Thank you. And I will make sure everybody has your contact information. And we really value and appreciate what you're doing in the world.
great. Well, thank you again. And yeah, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Barbie.
If this story spoke to you, let's keep the healing going. Visit barbiemoreno.com for my online course, Awakening Your Worth and Healing Energy sessions, one-on-one coaching, and your free healing guide. Your next step is waiting.